Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move? Hi there, I'm Arlene Battishill, your host and resident provocateur, and I am thrilled to have Amy Lyle on the show today. And you are going to be thrilled at the conversation that Amy and I have, because as she shared with me just before we came on, she's been doing some public speaking recently on a topic that she says the title of the topic is Why I Should Share My Most Mortifying Moments, and You Should Too. And she's having tremendous success with that. And she's also written what I would venture to say is a best-selling book on Amazon. And it is called, hopefully I'm going to get this right, Amy, the Amy Binegar-Kimmes-Lyle Book of Failures, a funny memoir of missteps, inadequacies, and faux pas. And I'm just going to give you a little taste of what some of the reviewers have said about Amy. But let me say this first. It says, if you've ever failed at love, finances, been fired, not fit in, self-diagnosed yourself with disorders and conditions, and or said, I really need to get my shit together, this is the book for you. And the reviewers have said the funniest, wittiest, and most relatable book a girl could ever read. Another says, if you have ever been married, divorced, had a relationship where he or she was not that into you, been a student, shit your pants, had a crazy awesome friend, or have kids in your life, you'll find something relatable in this book. And this book will make you feel, as a woman and as a mother, that you suck less. And someone else says, don't read while it says, don't read while drinking your coffee or anything else. It will shoot out of your nose from laughing. And so I would venture to say that we're going to have a very engaging conversation today. And normally the people I have as guests on my show are entrepreneurs, and, it's the typical brick and mortar store, or they've got an online, they're selling something online. And we talk about the challenges that they've had in their life that sort of set them on the trajectory to where they are today. But Amy is a little different because she has quite a different backstory. And so, Amy, thank you so very much for joining me today. I'm so looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you for having me. That was a marvelous, warm introduction that you gave me.
Well, you deserve it. I mean, the way in which you were making everybody laugh. And especially if you've written a book that makes us as women feel like we suck less, I'm all for it. I'm your biggest fan.
Well, I love it when people understand the intention of the book. That was the intention, was to make you feel like you are not alone out there. We're all trying to, be good employees, be good spouses, be good moms, and a good friend. And it's hard to juggle all of that. And sometimes you think, am I the only one that's feeling this way? And the answer is no, we all are having problems.
Absolutely. And just for, our audience to know, Amy is very highly sought after by the media and other people who are interested in bringing Amy's wonderful story and hilarious book to the masses. And I am just so honored that I get the privilege of having you on the show today. So thank you so very much, Amy.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So as is always the case, I like to start with, okay, yeah, you're fabulous. You're successful. This is so great. And, like all of us, we present ourselves out in the world in a certain way that is, of course, our best selves. And never do we want to peel away the mask or uniform that we wear every day to reveal the blemish or anything else that makes us feel like the world might see us less than who we are or as less than who we are. And also, those situations that we've been confronted with in life that in many cases have been very devastating or have been hugely challenging and lead us to the point of, being in a moment where we have to say to ourselves, oh my God, what is my next move? And so if you can, Amy, before, we get into the present of all of your success and the joy and happiness that you're bringing to so many people with your humor and your writing, beautiful writing, why don't you walk me through the kinds of things that you've experienced that probably are things that, most people would rather not have happening in their life.
Sure. And a quick note about the book. The book is definitely not a how-to. It may be even more be like a how not to, but it's kind of like, let's say my life, my life is pretty good. Let's say it's an 8. And then at the end of the book, it's still an 8. It's more like, you know what? We can get up one more day. We can try this one more day. But yeah, you're right. My background is riddled with some issues that a lot of people share. I, went through a divorce, after being with my first husband for 13 years. And that kicked off. I, had a child and needed to get a higher paying job. And then in 2008, got laid off with half of my coworkers. The economy crashed, and then laid off for 5 months and then back to work and then remarried. And when I got remarried, I had a travel job. And my husband said, why don't you stay at home? I went from having 1 child part-time to 4 kids full-time. And I was like, oh, that would be great. We're doing all the running around. And I never realized how lonely being a stay-at-home mom could be ever. Wow. So that's what kind of kicked off a lot of writing.
Wow.
And I felt, am I the only one that's feeling this way? I was like you, a sales trainer, and had always been in sales, and you get rewarded, you see your name in lights, you see the commission checks, and then all of a sudden, no one's like, you folded the laundry again. That's not,
well,
great job.
It's really extraordinary to consider the life of stay-at-home moms, because there is nothing out in the world today that ever acknowledges what they're doing and how significant it is, how the world would not function if it weren't for stay-at-home moms. I mean, it's just absolutely impossible, because there are so many women who are stay-at-home moms because there are a number of young children that have to be cared for, and they don't have, there isn't enough money to be hiring nannies like some people have that option and luxury, in fact. And you're in a situation where when you have a number of children, or if you choose to stay home with your children, because that's something that, everyone would love to have the ability to do that if, the income requirements of the household didn't demand that, both partners, or even in the case of a single mom, that she's working. And so, I always think about women who are in situations, yes, they've absolutely chosen to have children, and, they are the joy of a mother's life, but there are huge costs and consequences to a woman who is in a situation where she either has to stay home with the kids or she's choosing to. And one of the things you point out is the whole feeling of loneliness that's associated with that. So why don't you talk a little bit about what it was like for you as a single mom? Obviously, it was the loneliness, but, for many single mothers, or for many mothers who are going to stay at home and be stay-at-home moms, they were working before they became stay-at-home moms, and they had careers and professions. And like you say, you're out in the world and you're getting a lot of kudos and reinforcement for who you are out in the world, because that's how you're defined. And now all of a sudden, you're out of the workforce, you're at home. Where is your network? There's no opportunities for networking and all that sort of thing. So why don't you talk to me a bit about the impact of what it meant for you in your life being a stay-at-home mom?
It was a shock to my system. And after a few months, it was probably the longest summer of my life. And I'm not sure why my husband decided, his kids had gone to camp every single year. He was a widow. And so, his kids went to camp in the summer, and then we got married. He's like, you won't have to go to camp. And I was like, what? And so imagine, and so then I didn't even have the reprieve of them going, to school, and they're great kids. It's not that I like, kids, and I like my kids. It's just, it was such a shock to be 24 hours a day with the kids. And I was, my nerves were rattled, to be honest with you. And a few months in, my sweet husband said, why don't you get away with some of your girlfriends for the weekend? And so we went away from the weekend, and it was this nice mixed crowd. There were about 10 girls, and half of us were divorced. All of us had been married. Half of us were divorced. Some people had been remarried. Everybody had kids. About half stayed at home, and half worked. And it was so funny through the course of the weekend. A lot of wine, of course, is involved on a girls' weekend, and, romantic comedies and stuff like that. And it was so funny, like the truth started coming out of like, well, you're a stay-at-home mom, you don't have to wear high heels every day. And then, the stay-at-home moms would say, yeah, but you get to eat lunch with grown-ups. And then the, working moms would say, well, you're at home in case, you have to take the kids to the doctor or the dentist or orthodontist. And then the stay-at-home moms are like, that's all I do is take the kids to the doctor, dentist, or orthodontist. So it was a great, and then I wrote a movie about it. I think we're going to talk about that later. Before the book, even, I wrote a screenplay. And that's what it's about. It's a funny comedy, kind of like a Bridesmaids meets Bad Moms, but it doesn't really have a message per se. If someone asked me what the message is, I would say to have those two groups step towards each other, because there are benefits and, negatives to both, and that we need to respect and appreciate each other's position, that we're doing the best that we can for our family in the best way we can.
Now, let me ask you something about this, because I have to assume that when you put those two groups together, there is either an overt judgment or an underlying judgment that both sides of the coin are feeling. Whether or not it's actually happening, I would think that, everyone's looking at someone else's life and saying, oh, well, you have this, or, oh, you have that. Or it's, well, why aren't you doing this? Because, like, what are you doing? It seems ripe for the potential to have judgment being issued toward and upon one another. Did you find that to be the case? I'm sure these were all your friends and everything, but just talk about that a little bit, about where the judgment comes in, because I know, for everyone in life, there is this feeling of being judged, and none of us like it, but it's something that we do all the time to other people because of whatever it is that's going on for us. When you cast judgment on someone, it's really a reflection of yourself and what it is that's going on for you, and your displeasure about your own self. And instead of dealing with that or claiming it yourself, you're basically projecting it onto other people. So what are your thoughts?
I think in that group, we've been friends for years and years and years. And so, some of it came to the surface, but I think you're correct that there is sometimes an assumption that somebody has it better, or, somebody's not doing enough. And, one thing that came out that was so funny during the weekend was, one woman, was a teacher. And so she knew all the ins and outs of the middle school. She knew all the gossip. She knew which parents drop their kids off late every day, and this and that and the other. And, it came up that one of my best girlfriends is an executive at Coke. And, she lives an hour outside the city. She has a huge job. She travels, and, she has 3 kids. And, she said she got called into the office because they said marshmallows are not a snack. And, she said, marshmallows are a snack. And it was just this hilarious disconnect from kind of the stay-at-home moms. They wanted to judge her because, well, she works at Coke and she just doesn't understand. And my girlfriend's like, no, I understand carrots are better for them, but my kids like marshmallows. She was just holding firm to that. So, and her point was, I bet there are stay-at-home moms that give their kids marshmallows too. It was just hilarious that people kind of jumped on her, because she had a career, she had lost touch that marshmallows were pure sugar. It's like, no, she works for a software company. She knows about sugar. So, but mainly it was very lighthearted. There were no battles, but you're right. Everybody does have preconceived notions about the life of being a stay-at-home mom or the life of being a working mom. Right. And, nothing is as good as it seems, and probably nothing is as bad as it seems.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great commentary on the reality of life for everyone. So now, were you writing your screenplay and your book at the time that you were a stay-at-home mom? Or walk me through the timeline of what happened from the point that you were a stay-at-home mom as we're moving forward in your story.
Sure. Well, I didn't do well, to be honest with you, as a stay-at-home mom. And I totally admire the stay-at-home moms. I really, really do. It just, I am a creative person, and so I took a very small step and I became an actor. I took a improv class, I took an acting class, and I tried out for this role. It's a reoccurring role for a giant nonprofit here in Atlanta. And I've been doing that for years and years. And then once I started doing that role, I was like, oh my goodness, who writes these scripts? They're so funny. And they said, oh, would you like to submit a writing sample? So I submitted a writing sample, and then I've been contracting with them. So now I also write these little cute plays. They're really funny. And so that gave me an outlet. I mean, even though I was at home, I had a deadline to meet and had something to look forward to. And certainly there's joys of being a mom and being a wife and all that. But it gave me something kind of my own to look forward to every week. And then I started submitting writing samples to magazines. So I'm a contributor to some local magazines here in town. So that's kind of how I got started. I wrote the screenplay prior to writing the book. And what happened is I wrote the screenplay, and under the mentorship of a gentleman who had vetted films for Disney for 10 years. And after we were done, he's like, you're done. He introduced me to his entertainment attorney in LA, and over the phone. And I called the entertainment attorney up. He said, hi. And yes, so-and-so told me you were calling. And I was so excited and told him my story. And I've got this great screenplay. And he listened. And then he said, Amy, I'm not going to represent you. You're nobody. You don't know anyone, and you don't have any money. And it sounds like it's the best idea. It sounds like it's relevant for today. I know that it's structurally sound because you worked under this gentleman, but I'm not going to represent you. And, excuse my language, but I was so sad that I paused for a second, and then I said, that really makes me effing sad. And
I should tell you, you can actually say fucking sad on my show.
Okay, that's what I said.
You go right ahead.
Because I was so sad. And he started laughing, and he said, you know what? Let me give you some advice. You have to get on the map. You can't just show up in Hollywood and sell a film. Mm-hmm. And he said, you need to write a book or a blog or something. And I said, well, what would I write a book about? I just finished the screenplay. And he said, write what you fucking know. And he hung up. And it was a great piece of advice. That was a great piece of advice. And Arlene, I'm not kidding, within seconds, I was like, I have had a lot of failures. And so that's what kicked off the Book of Failures. And it's an essay style similar to, like a Trevor Noah or David Sedaris or Tina Fey. That's the style of it. You can, pick it up and put it down. But so I started working on that. And then the beautiful thing about that is, and I worked very hard to promote it, I'm my own PR person. And, I found that if you ask people nicely, hey, would your viewers or your listeners be interested in my story? A lot of them say yes. Some of them say no, but you just be honest about your story. But anyway, it's come full circle where that attorney is representing me, and my film is now in development.
Oh, isn't that crazy? It. Are you kidding?
No. And okay, this is even crazier. This is crazy. Before we move forward with the film getting made, you're not going to believe this. I'm sitting at my desk, and Paradigm Agency in LA sends me an email and says, hey, who owns the rights to your book? We have a client that's interested in it for a film or a sitcom.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah. So, and then I sent that to Peter, the entertainment attorney, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I don't know what's going to come of that. I don't know, but it was almost like it had happened. Have you ever had that in your life where you get the fact that somebody in Hollywood read my book and said, this would make such a funny film. This would make such a funny sitcom, and took time out of their day to call up or email Paradigm to find out. Like that's just so exciting to me. Like somebody gets it. Somebody understood it. So that was exciting.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, this is so rich, everything that you just described, because the pivotal moment for you, I mean, you had a moment where all your hopes and dreams, I may be exaggerating when I say that, but
squashed. No,
all your hopes and dreams, everything you had invested of yourself in this one thing just simply vanished in a moment where someone who had the power to help you told you that this was not going to work. And in many cases, people just shrivel up and shrink away from it. And they're so discouraged and so dejected that they just accept that that's what it was. And this is the end of their dream. And then they go back to working for somebody else, or they just give up. But what's so interesting about this, and I think probably quite rare, is that this guy actually gave you a piece of advice that enabled you to pivot, which doesn't happen very often, where the person who's telling you no is then saying what you need to do next. And that piece of advice where he said, write what you fucking know, actually, I mean, it was that simple, that one suggestion to you is what turned this whole thing on its head and enabled everything that happened thereafter to actually take place. And I find that absolutely extraordinary. But what I think is what I want to explore with you is, in the moment that he's giving you this great feedback about how wonderful it is, what you've written, and then at the same time says to you, but sorry, I'm not going to represent you. You're nobody and you have no money. And it's kind of like, oh, that's really great. I'm nobody and I have no money. And now my life is over because I can't change the fact that I'm nobody and the fact that I have no money. And so you said that you were really, really sad. Was there anything else that you were feeling in that moment as it pertained to all of your hopes and dreams about what you thought was going to happen in your life as a result of your writing?
I think it's unique that I come from a sales background. I was in sales for 20 years, outside and inside sales. I mean, that was my background before I became a corporate trainer. And to hear the word no to a salesperson is not the no, is the first no. Mm-hmm. And so it never for 1 second was I like, I'm never going to make it. I mean, I didn't think that. I thought, I really took his advice to heart and was like, okay, I'll do that. And I mean, I started that day, Arlene. I was like, oh, he wants a book. Oh, he's going to get a book. And I cranked that thing out and, got the content editor and got the proofwriter and, got the cover photography and, got it going. And, I'm just a very, I have a lot of tenacity from coming in sales. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not one of those people, how you meet people, like, let's say, in Atlanta, the lottery was like $1 billion. I'm not even kidding. It was like $1 billion a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And people would say, I can't even imagine winning $1 billion. And I was like, oh, I can. I can imagine. I could tell you what I would spend on that $1 billion right now. I mean, and so, that's probably a blessing and a curse.
But wait, are you also the same person who's absolutely certain you're going to win?
Oh, exactly. I was reading, my mom gets People magazine and I always take them from her when she's done. And gosh, I can't remember the actor and I really like her, where she said, I always assume I'm not going to win. And so, and I did think that. I was like, oh no, I always thought I was going to win and I never win. I never win, but I always think I'm going to win.
Yeah, me too. I have that exact same attitude. Now,
it's a distorted view.
It really is. But, I mean, you have two choices. Either you go into every situation thinking, yeah, I'm going to win or I'm going to be a success. Or you go in thinking, no, I'm not going to win and I'm not going to be successful. And it's like, why would you choose the latter? You know what I mean?
I know. And when you have a book of failures, there's nothing I can do that's wrong. Right. Because it's like, of course that's what happened. you have a whole book about failures. Of course. I mean, it's the worst things that happen to me, the funnier they are. And I'll just write about them. I mean, I'm already writing, a second book called The Failures of My Friends, because everybody has a funny failure story. I mean, be it on an airplane, or recently I was collecting stories about coworkers. Oh my goodness. I was laughing so hard I was crying. People were telling me about coworker story. people are crazy. And, and I'm giving them credit. It's kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul, but it's failures. And I'll of course tweak them. They tell me the story and I write the story, or they send me an email the story and I change the story. Mm-hmm. But, it's so fun and I'm so excited. So that'll be out by the end of the year, but when you write a book called The Book of Failures, you have so much freedom. You have so much freedom to be like, you can do whatever you want.
Well, yeah, because if you write a book about failures, no one actually has any expectations of you,
Right.
It's all going to be a failure. So we're good.
I know. And what's so weird is I have a really good life. I love my neighborhood. I love working. I have, my husband has a great job. I have a great life. And what's funny, and, it was one of those moments where you had to look at yourself for a second, mm-hmm. is when people read my book and they didn't understand the intention of, hey, I'm trying to lift you up. And they attacked me with, oh, well, you live in a nice neighborhood, or you drive this kind, and it was like, you're I feel like that's so petty. Like, I don't know that you could win the lottery tomorrow, Arlene. I would be like, oh my gosh, I am so excited for you. You could win an Oscar. I'd be so excited for you. I hang out with women that lift each other up. Yeah. And so when I got the criticism from some women of like, your life is almost perfect and you're calling yourself a failure, I'm like, you're missing the point of the book. You're missing the point. Yeah. But most of the reviews, like you read, they're like, this is my life. Do you have a camera on me? This is what's happening to me too. I also fell down a flight of stairs, So most people get it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Amy, when you think about people who can't find a way to celebrate your success. Oh my God, they can so totally be there for you if you're having a hard time and you're in despair, or you're going through a divorce. And, people love to see other people down, because then they can be there for them and then they can be supportive. But your real friends are truly those people that can celebrate your successes. And you could have, let's say that your screenplay, which is now in development, goes on and does $1 billion at the box office. And there are your friends who are, hopefully not going to be resentful of that success. But if you really have friends that are truly invested in you and the relationship that they have with you, they are celebrating all day long every success that you have, because it's not like you're a different person. It's not that your success makes you a different person, because you still have gone through your life of all the challenges that you've had. And there's nobody who ends up at a point in their life writing comedy or writing things that are really humorous that have not also experienced a tremendous amount of pain. Because I know, if you go and look at all of the stand-up comedians, people do stand-up comedy because it's an outlet for them. It is a way for them to express their pain. And so it is really unfair to suggest to someone else who's had a level of success that is quite high and for most people unattainable that, oh, you've just got the perfect life. It's so dismissive, because it doesn't ever acknowledge the reality of that person's life and story. And so if you would, can you talk with me a bit about the kinds of things that have happened in your life that have informed the way that you write and the kind of humor? And I know that you've done stand-up comedy before. What are the things that actually influence the kind of writing that you do that is all about humor?
I came from a very, very small town in Ohio, Marietta, Ohio. And it's very divided. I always joke and say it's like Honduras. It's like rich and poor. And so there's a lot of suffering there. It's on the Rust Belt. And, luckily, my dad had, he had a very solid blue collar job. He worked for the phone company, and, we had health insurance. Like that's kind of big. There's a lot of people there that don't have health insurance. Mm-hmm. And my dad is German. My grandparents are I come from this very stoic do not talk about your problems. Do not talk about anything. We talk about the weather, and never, ever, ever draw attention to yourself, ever. And, my sister and I, we were stand-up comedians, by 6, because we would imitate my dad. I had this 4-poster bed, and the top of it would twist off, and you could twist off, and it's like the perfect microphone size. And we had like a mirror on the back of our door, and we had record players. They had Grease on them. Like the album cover of Grease was like on the record cover. So that's, we'd roller skate in our basement and put on these shows. But anyway, a part of our comedy show and roller skating act in the basement was imitating, my dad. And we'd have these broken down like lazy boy chairs down there. It was literally concrete where the washer and dryer was. And so she'd interview me and I'd interview her, and we'd do shows. And it was or we just imitate us in the car with my dad. For example, he's in the front seat, we're beside him, and we would start giggling, and he would say, stop giggling. And then that would make us giggle more, because he's telling us to stop giggling. And then he's like, stop giggling, girls, nothing can be that funny. And so we would, I can just remember doing that as such a young age, of saying all the funny things that my dad would say. Water was like the solution. Like, if you had a headache, you had a stomach ache, you had, your heart was broken, just drink more water. And so it didn't matter what was going on. So we would do that even as kids. And then, and then for stand-up comedy, to your point, you usually write about what my favorite comedians are the people that talk about their families. Eddie Murphy, Kevin Hart. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank.
Margaret Cho talks about her family all the time.
Yes, Jim Gaffigan, Sarah Silverman, Sebastian, Monique. They talk about their families and friends, and I think that makes the truth is so funny.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an influence. My comedy is very clean, and it's geared towards women my age. When I'm at the punchline, it's a mixed crowd, but I have this bit about I'm a mom, I live in the suburbs, I spend a lot of time on Facebook, and then
that's the routine that I saw.
Yes, you saw it, and it was like, and if you're going through a hard time, I put that I'm praying for you, and sometimes I do pray for you, sometimes I don't.
Oh my God, this is hysterical. Amy, you know what? I want to turn back to something here, because I'm very curious about something that you said about your family being very stoic, and that you're not supposed to talk about your problems, and you don't draw attention to yourself. And that actually is a very common story that I hear from people. And what I find really curious, well, let me ask you this. Growing up in an environment like that, how did that make you feel?
Well, my parents were not to be reckoned with. They were very, very old school, and that, my sister and I were very scared of my parents, and you were seen and not heard. It was a different time. I'm 46. It was a different time where, today's world of you're spending more on your children's sports than you spend on your mortgage. That wasn't the time. Kids today, I think are overindulged. I really do. I think they're getting very overindulged, and the whole world revolves around them. So, we were little soldiers, I guess you could say. We wanted to toe the line. We wanted to fly under the radar. And, but as you can, and my sister always flew under the radar her whole life. She was, had a dry sense of humor, but very quiet, and never wanted to be the the center of attention, versus I went, into a totally different direction, more of the class clown. And, I love to hold court at dinner parties, telling funny stories, and, I'm going to be an actress. And, so sometimes, and I love reading people's stories that are similar to mine, right? That's why we love to hear stories, because we see ourselves in those people. And, I hear that all the time, or I read that all the time, where people came from backgrounds where it's like, shh, don't say anything, and, don't be noticed, and blend in. And then they're like, I can't make me blend in. And, so I love that. Eventually it's going to come out. It might come out in different ways. Hopefully it comes out in positive ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you feel that, you were living in an atmosphere of silence?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. We, my kids, when we're at dinner, we always have like, high, low, what's the best what's the best thing that happened today? And what was the worst thing that happened today at school? And we just, we really talk with our kids. We don't just talk to our kids. We really have conversations with our kids. And that's not the era of then. That wasn't, how my father was raised, and that's not how I was raised. Kids were spoken to. That's how it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very common story among people of a certain generation. It certainly was true of my own generation. I'm about 10 years older than you. And I know the same thing happened in my house. And, the silence in those households is absolutely deafening. And so can you talk a little bit about what, if any, impact that silence had on you as you were growing up and then on into your life as an adult?
When I was a kid, I wasn't home that much. My sister and I were swimmers. We were in swimming since we were 5 years old, and until we were both collegiate level swimmers. Both of us chose not to swim in school, but that, I don't know if you know anything about swimming, but you have your head in the pool morning, noon, and night. You're away. And so I was, I wasn't in home that much. So there was plenty of opportunity to cut up and be around friends and be around my friends' parents, and not everybody's household was the same. And so I knew there was something different out there. And I think I wrote a lot of poems as a child, and I've always loved writing, and I love, I can't draw at all, but I love to draw. And, so I just found other outlets and would do any Broadway show I could do, in my bedroom mirror with my, my microphone or my, hairbrush. So that's how you do when you're a kid. You just pretend. You live in a world of pretend to escape that.
Right.
Because when you're upstairs, you need to be quiet, but when you're downstairs, you can be yourself, kind of a thing.
Yeah. So it's almost like you're living two different lives within the same household.
I know, it's weird because you're like, don't you see how sparkly I am? Why can you not?
Yeah, it is pretty funny. Now, that's a great transition or bridge into my asking you about you being in sales. And for anybody who's involved in sales, what does that mean? You're constantly engaging with people, and you're trying to get them to see things in a certain way that will then give you what you want from them, which is for them to buy something from you. But there is so much in selling. There is so much that goes on in the interactions that you have with that person. And do you think that, your experience as a child and in the kind of family that you had and around the silence and you living these two lives, one is, a child in the upstairs part of the house and the other is the child in the downstairs of the house. How did that, or as you think about it, how did that translate for you or manifest itself in your desire to be in sales?
Well, my dad his grandparents were, my grandparents, my father's parents were, lived through the Depression. I mean, they were the real deal. I mean, they had a farm and a little tiny store in a town, you will not believe this, of 35 people, and 7 of the people were their own family. He had 5 kids and the mom and the dad. And so, money was something that was talked about a lot, and not wasting money and saving money and not getting in debt and all that stuff. So, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got out of college, but it was, drilled into my head that I needed to be, self-supporting. And sales for me, I don't know. I just loved it. I loved the challenge of it. I like building relationships, and I sold temporary staffing. in my market, there were 350 other people selling temporary staffing. And I don't know if you know anything about temporary staffing. We had some great employees that came in that were new in town, and they just didn't know how to get into big companies. So they come in. And then we had some great teachers in the summer that would come in. We had some truly great employees that would come in that really wanted a job, and we would help them, and then they would fly. And it was fantastic, and it was very rewarding. But I worked and later in life, you move up in temporary staffing. I staff like IT people, and that's very professional, and they're awesome, and, very, very few problems with that. But when I started out, I was staffing very, minimum wage type jobs like call center and, front desk receptionist. And, that they paid, $8 or $9, $10 an hour. And what I learned was there's a freedom when you only make $9 an hour, because you can quit your $9 an hour job without calling me, and you can get another $9 an hour job tomorrow. And so it was, and so my sales pitch would always be, I'm like, we have the best of the worst. I'm like, they're like, these temporaries are terrible. I'm like, they're all terrible, but we screened them. And we really did. The company I work for, we really did. We did all this background check and a credit check. And I'm like, of the worst out there, we have the best. And they can start tomorrow. And so then it set expectations. Like, I'm not going to put my name on someone and be like, they're amazing. I would say, hey, this is what their references said. And it sounds like they're pretty solid. What do you think? And, and I was very successful in that. It was a fun time. And then later, it became, 100% a trainer, a corporate trainer. And that was fun. We'd bring these new kids in and listen to them on the phone. And it was so funny how they sell themselves, because they would say things like, the company's been in business for 45 years. And it's like, no one cares about that. That's not what they're buying. That's not what they're buying. So it's and now today, I mean, I think, a failure story. I'm going to give you a failure story, Arlene.
Go for it.
I wrote this book, I'm independently published, and so excited. If you go to Amazon, you look at my book and you look at the ebook, my book, Amazon ratings change hourly, is nestled in with my heroes. Literally, it's nestled in with like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Amy Schumer, Chelsea Handler, Noah, Trevor Noah. I mean, it's so exciting. So of course I didn't know that when I wrote the book, but when I kicked off, I'm like, I'm going to go big or go home. So I had this giant launch party and, at a country club, open bar, 333 women showed up, and that was a big, big bar tab, as you can imagine. And it wasn't about me. Like, I had, women that had changed their life after 40. My plastic surgeon came and she was the MC. She gave away, I'm not making this up, a vaginal rejuvenation treatment. She gave away a vampire facial. And so weeks preceding the event, I was able to get press on that, because it's like, well, my book launch, we're giving away a vaginal rejuvenation. What are you doing? And
sell the premium, maybe sell that premium.
Exactly. So they pile in there and we have this great night. And then I didn't really have any hard copy books. I had like maybe one box, but I wanted everybody to buy the book online, because then it hits all at once, and then your ranking goes up. So I'm like, okay, we took them through this emotional journey, blah, blah, blah. 1, 2, 3. The internet crashed. I didn't sell one book.
Oh, fuck.
But I sold 500 the next day.
Of course you did.
So that was fun. But anyway, my whole point of that story, I'm so sorry it was so long, is it was never a sales pitch. None of that was a sales pitch. It was, come to a party. And my girlfriends were laughing because I would post like, and we're going to have Prosecco and cheese. And they would reply back, and there's cheese. And like, Amy, nobody's coming to the party because of your cheese. And
yeah, you can't.
But it was a whole night.
You can't sell the facts and the figures and the features and the benefits. That's not what people buy.
No, it was it was the experience. Yeah. The whole night was about lifting up women, lifting up other women. That was the experience. And that was the point of the book. And you've seen it and I've seen it, where the only thing they post is their book, and it's like, that's not what people are buying. You've got to, sell without selling, I think. Mm-hmm. That's a bit kind of like branding. You know what I mean? You're branding yourself, and if people are interested, then maybe they'll buy your book.
Right. Well, what's really interesting is just talking about experience and selling the experience. And, that's now the big thing, as if it's just been invented, that everybody's talking about, oh, you have to sell the experience. Well, that's always been the case, because people buy based on their emotions. And so it sounds to me that throughout your entire career, and especially now in the writing that you're doing, everything you talk about is the experience. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I love, and you wouldn't be in this business if you didn't love this too. My favorite part, I'm not going to make this up, of staffing was going in and hearing the story of the company. Yeah. How did they come to that? How was it founded? Is it a family company? What happened? What struggles have they had? I love that. And I love the story of, okay, this is a social experiment. We live in a world, especially women, I think, of where do you work? Where do you live? Where do your kids go to school? And I think that if you are on the upper echelon of that, you don't mind those questions. Right. If you are on the bottom, it's like somebody's asking you, so how smart are your children and how much money do you make? That's what those questions are. Versus if you sit down next to someone. I remember I was at a conference. I was very nervous, and I sat down next to some woman, and this woman looked down. She's like, "Oh dear God, I was in such a hurry. I have one navy shoe on and one black shoe on." And I'm like, immediately like, this girl, I'm going to like. This girl is authentic. And I think that's so true. I did this in for that big group I was talking about, the women's club. I did this short social experiment and talked about asking those types of questions versus asking the questions, have you ever fallen down in public? Have you ever walked out of the bathroom with your skirt tucked in your underwear? And, have you ever met someone and 2 seconds later forgotten their name? And you feel better about the people around you with those types of questions versus what do you have? How much do you have? I don't like those questions. And I think it's true.
Because it's so descriptive and it's judgmental because we all have, a way of sizing people up based on certain criteria because then we can figure out where we are in relation to them.
Right. And I think like somebody who's intimidating to me, I hope you appreciate this story, is like a Kanye West. He's very intimidating. He had 21 Grammys. And I read something about him where he said, he thinks he competes with, Michelangelo in the pyramids. He doesn't think he even competes with his modern peers. He thinks of himself as a god. And so it's like, if you were in an elevator and Kanye West stepped in, I would be very nervous. But then did you know he used to work at the Gap? And so you're like, you know what? He folded 7,000 jeans just like the rest of us in high school. And so I just think stuff like that makes people, more approachable. Like, I know you worked at the Gap, Kanye. I know you did.
I know who you are. All this other stuff, that's not the reality. You were folding those jeans.
Exactly. You were getting a Cinnabon. We know you were getting a Cinnabon on your break in the mall.
You were in that mall your whole life before anybody called you Kanye.
That's right. Going back to your gremlin with your 8-track tapes like the rest of us. Saving for some sneakers like the rest of us. I like him as an artist. I was just using that as an example. He seems like he's intimidating.
Yeah. Well, he likes to present himself in that way because that's part of the experience he's trying to create for everybody else. And, it suits some emotional need that he has. There's no question about it.
Well, the gig is up. The gig is up for me.
Yeah.
Because I know he worked at the Gap.
God, that's ridiculous.
I know.
Oh, God. Well, let me ask you as we're just wrapping up, I can't even believe this has almost been an hour. It has been so delightful. What I always wrap up the episode with my guests is to just sort of think for a moment about, here's your life. This has been the trajectory of it. These were the challenges that you experienced. These were the failures that you experienced. And, every single time you have to ask yourself the question, what's my next move? And for the audience who's listening, who are in situations that they're really struggling with and trying to figure out what their next move is, what would you say to them about when they are in those situations that might help them to get clear about what they need to do next?
If it's someone that's struggling creatively and they feel like they're not moving forward, I would, especially, a writer, I would suggest that they start to try to get their work out in any capacity at all. There's such a need for content now more than ever before. Almost every magazine has, a web version, a digital version. And, of course you could push your own stuff out on a blog or whatever, or be a blog guest. But even if it's as simple as you're writing like a 350 word, writing sample and you start sending it out to local magazines. And even if you have to do it for free, but you get in, and by the way, if you get your work in a local magazine, that's like getting paid $1,000. It's like an advertisement for yourself. If you were going to put a page in a local magazine, it'd be $1,000. So think of it as something for $1,000 that you're getting for free, and start doing that, and then start accumulating your work. And then once you get going, then take that work and go to the next level, a bigger level, and do your homework. There's so many Facebook pages and Facebook groups that are dedicated to helping artists get started, writers get started, be it a podcast like this, Arlene, be it magazines that focus new writers, be it a local thing. The library has groups that are focusing, they're, trying to get new writers information out, be it you're a blogger or a novelist, whatever. And so my thing is that you take the first step and that you trust in your work that will lead to the next step. And nothing is built in a day. Nothing is built and you enjoy it. Like I want my movie to make $1 billion. I want my book to sell 1 million copies and be made into a sitcom, which by the way would be a very funny sitcom. All of you out in LA, very funny. And I really do. But being here today is so fun, sharing my story, laughing with you. And so I really would encourage people to try to think about that. Take enjoyment. One, if you love to write, that you're gifted with that you've been given that gift and you've probably been given that gift for a purpose. And so enjoy the next step.
Yeah,
even if it's 1 million little steps.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. And, I think that just like how we're having this conversation, the more that you connect with people around anything that you're doing, whether it's a struggle that you're experiencing or a journey that you're on or a business that you're trying to launch, when you connect with people, you never know what can happen. And you never know who those people know and how they might be able to connect you with someone else who can actually help you in what you're doing. And, that comes to me naturally because I'm pretty much a natural born salesperson, as it sounds you are, Amy. But for people who aren't inclined in that way or who are introverts to the extreme, it's really, really hard for people to do that because putting themselves out there is just too threatening. But at the end of the day, connecting with people is as simple as being at the bus stop, waiting for a bus that's taking forever to come and just striking up a conversation with someone and showing that you're interested in them, because everybody is just waiting for the moment when someone else actually sees them and acknowledges them and validates them. And the most unbelievable things happen as a result, but you actually have to take a step to reach out to somebody, even if it's just to say hi, because it opens up so many doors in your life. And would you say in your own experience that as you have connected with people, however it is that you've basically said hi and opened the door, that all of the things that have happened in your life have happened as a result of some interaction you've had with someone?
Absolutely. And, you mentioned sales. Sometimes I see on social media, somebody says something like, does anyone know any companies that are hiring? That's so broad that nobody will respond. But if you put, hi, I'm looking for a part-time job, approximately 15 hours a week at this location. I have great Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I like this. Probably it's going to ring a bell. And it's the same in anything. It's like, kind of put it out what you're looking for. You're not going to believe this. In my neighborhood, I was at dinner with a group of people and I was like, Tyler Perry lives in Atlanta. And I'm like, Tyler Perry would love this book. And I need to get this book in the hands of Tyler Perry. Well, you're not going to believe this. The private pilot of Tyler Perry lives in my neighborhood.
Oh my God.
And they put, and I had a book. I got the book in my hands. I'm so embarrassed I was so nervous. I was so embarrassed of what I wrote in the book. I'm like, to Tyler Perry, I love your work. Call me. And I put my phone number.
That's brilliant.
So maybe he is the mystery person that's inquiring about my book being turned into a sitcom. I don't know. Tyler, if you're out there, I love you. But, his office is actually behind my husband's, his house is actually behind my husband's office in Vinings. And my husband goes, they're building a shopping mall behind me. And then he goes, oh, wait, that's Tyler Perry's house. We love him.
Going to be in the house.
Yeah. We love him here in Atlanta. But I'm just saying that because you have to be specific. Like if you're a writer, what do you want next? I want to be in a magazine. Okay. Well, what kind of magazine? You just can't be like, I want to be. You have to be specific about your wants, because otherwise nobody can think of anyone to connect you to if you're not specific.
Yeah. And the thing too is that people generally are interested and willing to help other people if it's made clear to them how, they can help.
Right.
And so, like you say, to your point of, being that specific, well, if you are that specific, what you're looking for is going to find you because you've put it out there. You've given people the information they need to be able to go out there and do something on your behalf. And people you don't even know will actually help you. I know it just in my own life that has happened repeatedly, where I simply reached out to someone and said, this is what I'm looking to do. And they just opened every freaking door. It's unbelievable. But it requires you to ask.
I know. I started a writing group online. Well, we actually meet in person too, but we share, hey, this is a great, site that features authors. Hey, this is a great magazine that features authors. Hey, this bookstore, sign up and they may feature you as they do a monthly feature. We really share because it's so overwhelming of what's available and where should you spend your time and what have you had success with and what's the return on investment on that. And so, we have a group of 100 where it's all ladies and, we really support each other and share information like that. And there have been all kinds of connections. To your point, there have been people that are at the beginning of the journey and they needed a content editor. They're in the group. There's 3 magazine editors in my group and have picked up. So bookstore owners, you never know who you're going to meet. And I think if you're doing it with a pure heart, what goes around normally comes around. And there's such a satisfaction of helping someone else. It's like anyone that's ever volunteered at any point, I bet they will say they got more out of it than they put in it.
Absolutely. And there's no amount of money that can compare to the kind of gratification and satisfaction you get from helping people. I absolutely believe that.
Do you mind, Arlene, if I share where people can buy my book?
I was just about to ask you, how can people find you?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be bossy.
You're in sales, baby.
Would you like that book on Tuesday or Wednesday? No, I'm just kidding. Remember those old tapes? Oh my gosh. My boss had those Zig Ziglar tapes. They're so funny. Okay. So my book is available on Amazon and it's available in paperback ebook. And it just came out in an audiobook format. It's really great. It's read by Angela Massey. You think me being a stand-up comedian, I could read my own book, but I couldn't.
Yeah,
I could not read it.
It requires someone else. And give the listeners the exact title of the book again so they can find it.
Oh, sure. It is the Amy Binegar-Kimmes-Lyle Book of Failures. But if they type in the Book of Failures, it will Amy Lyle Book of Failures, it will pull up for them. And then my social media is www.amylyle.me. I would love to hear funny failures from you guys. And I will give you credit. If you're like, no way, I don't want my name in there, we'll put it under an alias. But I am looking for all kinds of failure stories. And then on Facebook, I'm, on there, Amy Lyle.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. Amy, this has been so delightful. I thank you so very much. And any last thoughts for people?
No, thank you so much for having me on your show. And if you, have a dream, I think it's just like you said, when you learn somebody's story, there's been a million bumps along the way and you just have to pick yourself up and do the next step. Or that could be the world telling you that's not for you. And many people thought they're going to do something and they got redirected, not misdirected. They got redirected and it turned out to be something better. So, keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's all about pivoting. When you're presented with something in life, you just have to pivot and you keep moving. I totally agree. Just keep moving. It's beautiful. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. You made me feel so comfortable.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's been great having you again.
Friends from college or something.
It's really nice. It's so great. We'll be talking again soon because I'd love to have you come back.
I'd love to. Thank you so much, Arlene, for your time. And I'm so excited for your show.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm Arlene Battishill. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back with another episode. Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move?